Iran-Iraq war is coming to an end. And in the 2,765 days of our administration, not 1 inch of ground has fallen to the communists.
The grand old party showed its appreciation tonight in New Orleans. But the enormously popular Ronald Reagan may be leaving some horrendously difficult problems for the next president. In more ways than one, Ronald Reagan will be a very tough act to follow.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Ted Koppel.
If you watched it, you know that tonight was what the Republican Party intended. Nostalgic, a little emotional perhaps, with the president who can wring more out of a cliche than any man alive, bringing the delegates to their feet by calling on George Bush to go out there and make it one more for the Gipper. President Reagan brought to this evening everything the GOP could have expected. The feisty pride of an old general who has led his troops through more than one victorious campaign, volunteering as a foot soldier, if need be, in the service of the man he was anointing as his choice for the next commander-in-chief. Ronald Reagan looked back with pride, looked ahead with optimism, and passed the torch to George Bush. Here's Nightline correspondent Judd Rose.
It was vintage Ronald Reagan.
So if there's any salute deserved tonight, it's to the heroes everywhere in this land who make up the doers, the dreamers, and the life builders without which our glorious experiment in democracy would have failed. So...
And there was even a little slip of the tongue.
Facts are stupid things. Stubborn things, I should say.
But mostly, the president played Republican truth squad to the Democrats' attacks of last month.
As one of the greatest presidents of the 20th century, and I say that as a history teacher.
He has touched the heart of America. He's reached the common folks with a message that is true.
He brought the country back to good patriotism, where the flag means something, and the Constitution means something, and brought more or less the people back to what the country was built on.
Oh, he makes you feel good. He makes you feel proud to be American.
In a way, it may be as simple as this. Ronald Reagan seems to enjoy being president so much, many Americans feel good just watching him do it. He has wrapped himself in symbolism with an actor's sense of stagecraft.
Mike Devers, in his book, said that I had a short attention span. Well, I was going to reply to that, but oh, what the hell, let's move on to something else.
He sold his philosophy, his programs, and himself to the American people with a salesman's pure persuasion. In times of crisis, he's shown guts and grace. And in times of tragedy, he has shouldered the nation's collective grief. No, it doesn't take the long view of history to know this much. In the age of image, the man from Hollywood was straight from central castings.
I think that people really like Ronald Reagan because he's the genuine article. He believes in certain things, and people, even if they don't believe in the same things as he does, respect him for it.
But will historians respect him quite so much? Here was a president who came in promising to cut taxes, increase defense spending, rein in big government and government social programs. He did all of those things, and Reagan years have been years of prosperity. Unemployment and inflation are roughly half what they were when Jimmy Carter left office. But that prosperity didn't trickle down to everyone, and it came at a price. Since the Carter years, the national debt has doubled, budget deficits have tripled.
I think the deficits are clearly one of the blackest marks over the Reagan administration over these past 8 years. This was an administration that came in committed to frugality, to discipline, to balanced budgets. It clearly did not achieve that. It achieved many other things, but it in effect paid for some of the prosperity with these big deficits.
Ironically, Reagan may get his best marks for foreign policy. Here, after all, was a veteran anti-communist who took a dim view of the Soviets.
let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world.
So who would have expected that same president to sign a treaty with the Soviets to reduce nuclear missiles and to stroll like a tourist through Red Square?
Clearly, the most positive aspect of this presidency is the new success in U.S.-Soviet relations, both in arms control, in making progress toward a treaty that the next president ought to be able to complete, and in having a more realistic relationship in human rights and the whole fabric of U.S.-Soviet relations. This is something that would have been very difficult for a Democrat to do. Ronald Reagan's anti-communist credentials made it possible for him to do it.
But Reagan lived up to those credentials. He sent troops to Grenada to fight what he said was a communist threat. He backed the Contra rebels in their failing fight against the leftist leaders of Nicaragua. And in a disastrous move, he sent Marines to Lebanon. But in defeat or victory, Reagan has remained popular.
I think Reagan, during the first 5 or 6 years of his presidency, became a father figure for the country, in much the way Dwight Eisenhower was. Iran-Contra toppled him from that pedestal.
In fact, Reagan tottered but didn't topple. The Iran-Contra scandal hurt his credibility, cast his detached management style in the worst light possible. But when the president's popularity plummeted, it ultimately came right back up.
The American public had a love affair with him. It's still going on, obviously, tonight. And I think the bottom line was that you couldn't get into a situation like Iran-Contra and get out of it as easy as he did unless you had that great communications ability and that great affection.
That he's a great communicator is obvious, but history may ask, how much was sizzle, how much was steak?
Ronald Reagan, all politicians are actors, and some are better actors than others, and Ronald Reagan's about the best of all.
And just in case there's anyone left who still doubts that, tonight President Reagan turned in a performance here that brought down the House. It was emotional, it was nostalgic, and it showed exactly why he'll be such a tough act to follow for either George Bush or Michael Dukakis.
So, George, I'm in your corner. I'm ready to volunteer. I'm ready to volunteer a little advice now and then and offer a pointer or two on strategy if asked. I'll help keep the facts straight or just stand back and cheer. But George, just one personal request. Go out there and win one for the Gipper.
Judd Rose for Nightline in New Orleans.
A little later, we'll talk with two members of American Agenda, a bipartisan group offering experienced assistance in the transition to a new administration after the November election. But first, when we return, we'll be joined by former Senator Paul Laxalt of Nevada, one of President Reagan's closest personal advisors, now on board the Bush campaign.